I care deeply about the planet and all of life on it. So when I say it's not about saving the planet, I'm suggesting a reframe. We don't need to save the planet, we actually need to save ourselves. If we want to still be able to live on the planet, we need to do something drastic now. We need to save ourselves.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Biomarket Insights TV. My name is Paul MacDonald, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Kathryn Sheridan, CEO and founder of Sustainability Consult. Kathryn has over 20 years in sustainability, first as an environment journalist and then as a communications consultant. Hi Kathryn, how are you today?
Hi Paul, I'm good, thanks. Happy to be here.
Good, lovely to have you on the show. I love the view outside your window, by the way. You look like you live in a very nice place.
I'm living in the woods, so yeah.
The perfect setting for a conversation about the bioeconomy.
Exactly.
Great. Well, listen, Kathryn, today's episode is entitled "It's Not About Saving the Planet," controversial. Our viewers are going to be really interested to learn about the future of sustainability, motivating people for change, runaway consumerism, and the leadership ripple effect. So loads of great stuff to get our teeth into. First of all, your business has been helping companies in the bioeconomy to position themselves and communicate with authenticity and credibility since 2008. Talk to me, let me know why you set up the business, your journey, and how you add value to the sector.
Thanks for the question. So I started out in journalism. I was an environment reporter in Brussels. I've been in Belgium for more than 20 years. And I switched from journalism into PR consulting, and I worked a lot on chemicals and plastics. And some of that was around sustainability and some of it wasn't. And so I reached the point in 2008 where I felt that a specialized firm was needed that would really focus on sustainability communications. So it's very much anti-greenwashing. And at that time, there was so much greenwashing happening. I mean, there's still quite a bit today. Some of it's inadvertent, or at least back then. I'll be generous enough to say that some of it was inadvertent greenwashing, but I just really felt strongly that it needed to be done better and done differently. And so that's why I set up Sustainability Consult in 2008. We quite quickly got into working on the bioeconomy, and what we bring there is a really deep network because we've been doing it for a long time, but the focus on credibility and thought leadership to make sure that people are communicating authentically and honestly. It's a very no-nonsense credibility approach.
Well, I think that's what's needed, and I know we're not going to. You done quite a lot of talks on authenticity and greenwashing, and that's not the primary focus of today's episode, and it could be an episode in its own right, but it's really challenging, isn't it? I've had a few conversations with businesses, and I don't know whether you're finding the same thing, and whether people are almost afraid now to communicate their green initiatives because they don't want to be accused of greenwashing if they've made an honest mistake.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And what we see really is an issue is when a company has like one small initiative that is green and the rest of the business is just a regular conventional business. We see that a lot with bio because maybe there's one product line or one material that is bio-based, but the rest of the business is not. But then when you look at the communications, it's all predominantly on the green part and not on the rest of it. So there needs to be transparency and honesty.
Yeah, and I think that's where the internal business and consumers then get very frustrated when they dig a bit deeper, don't they? They then see that lack of authenticity, and a brand is how it behaves, not what it tells you it is.
Yeah, and a brand's biggest asset is its reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the bioeconomy is still a pretty young sector, and you must have seen some big changes in the last 13 years.
I think when you're in it, it's quite hard to analyze the changes. We've certainly been through, all the ups and downs, all the successes and failures. I think what I'm seeing now, which links to what you just said about greenwashing, is there's a bit more understanding now about not greenwashing, but also not hyping, because that's kind of an extension of greenwashing. There's been so much hype, especially in the synthetic biology space. And I think that there's a bit more awareness now that you really need to be able to follow through with what you're saying. Of course, that doesn't apply to our clients because we're super strict on what claims can be made. Everything has to be backed up.
And you're quoted as saying, it's not about saving the planet, it's about saving society. Explain.
This is a really tricky one. Like, we've known for decades that we're destroying the planet, and we haven't done that much about it. So if it's just about the science, well, that's not working because it's still too abstract. It's not making people make the changes that they have to make. And I think we need to understand from a behavioral point of view what motivates people for change. And actually, sadly, it's not about the polar bears. It's about your house, in your street, in your little town, your kids, your life, the kids' school. It's about the heat waves and the floods and the wildfires and the mudslides and all of that that's already happening. And that's nothing compared to what's coming. And I care deeply about the planet and all of life on it. So when I say it's not about saving the planet, I'm suggesting a reframe. We don't need to save the planet. We actually need to save ourselves. If we want to still be able to live on the planet, we need to do something drastic now. We need to save ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the planet will still, the rock that we're standing on, it will still be there. It's people that are on the way out. So we have to do what we can. And even from scorched earth comes some regrowth. So the planet will benefit by us trying to save ourselves. We see all the big changes that are needed from governments and from corporations, but we also need to make big changes. So it's uncomfortable, and we don't like to be uncomfortable. We like to stay on the path, not to change things. But the threat needs to be severe enough that we get into a kind of almost wartime mentality, right? That says we're going to band together with our families and our communities, and we're going to do something about this now.
Yeah, and so is that not a little bit in conflict or contradiction to quite a lot of other stuff you hear, whereby yes, we can do our little bit, but actually it's got to come from governments, it's got to come from the actions and the implementation of things at COP26, for etc. It's got to come from big business. So how do you square that? Because that's what you're saying is very different to that.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is both and. So it's got to come from governments and it's got to come from industry. That where we've gone wrong in the environmental movement is putting it all on that, putting it all on these external, bodies are going to save us, and our little bit of recycling or whatever doesn't count. And it's true that a little bit of recycling is a drop in the ocean, but we have to do both. And I mean, no one's going to save us. We have to save ourselves. So it might seem contradictory, but I mean, I really believe that what we do on an individual level and on a local level actually makes the difference, because at the end of the day, the society is made up of people. So we just have to do, make the small changes that we can make and do what we can. And we've reached that point, where the motivation has to be there to say, in this family or in my life, what can we do? What are we able to do? What changes are we willing to make?
Yeah, and I think that if we were helped by government, I suppose, if we were helped, if there was TV campaigns to help us make those small changes. When I was interviewing George May of BioBean, and he was saying, we've moved away from shampoo bottles and shower gels and to hard bars of soap, and now I do that. And I was talking to my sister, and her family now don't have any shower gel, bar of soap and that sort of stuff. So I think it is a mix of those small things. If you add all those things up, then it will make a difference, won't it?
It will. And I mean, it's not just about the science, because we've known the science, for decades and decades, and it hasn't made the difference. It is the small changes. And like you say, you talk to somebody and then you talk to somebody else, and it's that ripple effect and that influence that you have. And I think with massive issues like this, we often feel powerless. But by doing those small things, like, you already see that you have a knock-on effect and that you've influenced somebody else. And that's also how change happens. We're not getting out of here alive. No one is going to save us. We have to do this by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think we talk about the ripple effect a little bit later in the episode. So, I don't want to be rude, but I guess no, I don't think it's rude, but I'm getting sometimes bored with the word or how the word is used. And that word is sustainability or sustainable. It seems to be a word that everyone just drops into every sentence without context, deliverables, or measurements of success. That's my opinion. What do you think is the future of the word and the movement?
I mean, it's such a good question. And if you're bored, I mean, I think that's a good thing. I've been bored of the word sustainable and sustainability for a long time because, as you say, it is just dropped in everywhere. It's like buzzword bingo. It's not about the label. What worries me about sustainability and the way that we are in sustainability, and I mean, I'm part of that movement, if you like, of sustainability. It's about sustaining the way things are. And to me, the way things are really broken. And the way things are, there's so much injustice, there's so much inequity. We are using the planet and people, we're treating them like resources that can be exploited. Sustainability is set up so that we can continue to consume, basically. Advertising, companies telling us that our lives are incomplete, that we're not good enough unless we've got the latest thing or a gadget or a gimmick or whatever. And in sustainability, we talk about circularity, we talk about eco-design. So yeah, there'll be some incremental improvements to how products are made. But the goal of sustainability still seems to be runaway consumerism. And I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone has all the answers, but I think we need to be having these conversations, especially when we're dealing with companies that have got the kind of budgets where they can make a difference in terms of how they invest and how they develop products.
Yeah, and that brings us nicely. Well, you mentioned a little while ago about sort of the wartime thought process, if you like, and bringing your family together and understanding what do you actually need, which links to my next question is around, are we in danger of just sort of patting ourselves on the back for simply being less bad while still fueling overconsumption with unnecessary practices, which is what you were just touching on. So, does that mean, how much of the stuff do we actually need?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I get excited about talking about regenerative models and that idea of not just doing less bad, but doing more good. When I first heard that from Bill Madonna, the father of the cradle to cradle movement, that literally blew my mind a few years ago. It's like, okay, it's not just about reducing harm. We can actually do something regenerative. We can actually do more good. And I think that's really key. We need to, bring that into all of our conversations. Is this regenerative?
Yeah, but it's that overconsumption, and I'm having that conversation with my son. I've got a 6-year-old son, and I'm trying to have that conversation whereby, okay, your birthday was in August, we're coming up to Christmas, half of the presents that you got in August we haven't opened and played with, and yet there's going to be another round of, poorly made, short-term stuff that he's bought by myself and by my family and friends and stuff like that. So I guess, that's a whole nother topic, isn't it? But how we sort of reduce our thirst and desire for this attainment of, I think you called them badges before.
I think if we have access to this, if we're able to make these kind of choices, we can consume less and consume better. So just buying better products that will last a lifetime. I've still got my box of Lego in the basement and I'm in my 40s. There are certain things which will endure. Or which can be passed on, later, that isn't just the kind of throwaway tat that's been imported, that's got, a massive carbon footprint and just doesn't really bring that much joy to the child either, because it is just, looking at the thing, it is just junk. So I think as parents, you have a bit of a difficult decision there, but it is one where you have an influence. And then when you're then talking to family members and talking about the type of presence or the type of experiences that you want for your kids, again, you're having an influence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sustainability for me sometimes is looked at in quite a one-dimensional way, in that it sort of make something in an alternative way or recycle it. Whereas sustainability covers every aspect of business and citizenship, especially when you look at sort of, the donut economic model type thing. So for you, what does good leadership look like? What should we be looking for in the future from the leaders of ourselves?
Well, I think that leadership is something we all do. It's not about this traditional leadership model that we're in right now, which is very top down, basically white supremacist patriarchy, which is just hanging on to power with its, with all it's got now, because that model is now under threat. I think leadership is something we all do. We all have access to it. It's that ripple effect that we talked about. We take leadership in our own lives. We decide how we want to live, how we want to engage in the community with those around us. And I think that every decision you make, like you talked about, the presence and the kids and stuff, all of those decisions, they have an impact on ourselves and on those around us. And that's, to me, that's leadership. And then that has that ripple effect. It rubs off on the people around you.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. It's taking ownership, isn't it? It's not waiting to be told by a perceived leader what to do and how to behave, because that's a hiding to nothing, I think.
Yeah, I think like sustainability and leadership, it's an inside job. I mean, that's why I'm working also one-to-one with people now, because these are really personal decisions. It's a personal journey. What am I willing to change? How do I want to deal with a child's birthday or Christmas or whatever? It's very personal. How far can I go right now, and where can I have an impact? We could all do everything, but we don't, because that isn't really possible for us. So where do we want to engage? What impact can we have?
It's really, we've got other things to discuss, but it's really difficult. You just made me smile, because I've been trying to get away from having balloons at children's birthday parties for obvious reasons. And everyone else turns up and thinks you're crazy because you don't have, sort of great big helium or other balloons. So yeah, it is difficult. But as you say, that ripple effect, when people start asking, why are you doing that? Why are you behaving in that way? Well, I'm doing it because of X, Y, and Z. And actually, it has a positive impact on my nuclear family, and the ripple effect from that, I think, is very powerful. So listen, the other really interesting, well, there's lots of interesting things about you, but one of the other interesting things is that you are a qualified trauma-informed coach, mentor, and forest therapy guide. So how parts of these sort of dovetail in the work you do in the bioeconomy?
Well, you've had quite a few conversations with me in the last few months, and you know that I'm not one for small talk. I've always wanted to get into the real stuff, and have real deep conversations and connection with people. And in my work as a consultant, there's always a line, that you don't cross, which is like the personal line. And I've been into sustainability for 20 years, and I've often seen, there are things that are holding us back. Like, what is stopping us actually moving to that next level in terms of sustainability and doing things differently and doing things better? So I always thought there was more work to be done, but as a consultant, I wasn't quite authorized to go there. So I ended up training. I'd done a lot of personal work myself, but I ended up training as a coach, and I have a trauma-informed approach. And working in sustainability is hard. We're trying to make change. It's slow, it's frustrating. It can be quite lonely in a company for the people that are actually really pushing sustainability. And a lot of people burn out. And another thing that I work on is compassion fatigue, which is that moment, and it happened to me a few years ago, where you think, I have spent my whole career working on trying to make a difference, and you look around you and it just gets worse and worse, and you feel like you're not making a difference. And that can be a real blow. It's basically an existential crisis, a big blow to the psyche. And so all of this and all of these interests and the eco-psychology that I studied, it all came together with deciding to also, as well as being a consultant in the bioeconomy, also working one-to-one with people as a coach. And I love it. It's part of my job that I really love.
That's really interesting. So you would have been as a consultant, you would have been helping businesses, but you're still seeing where they need your assistance and your help and where their problems are. And that leads you to get to know the individuals as well and then take it to that next step. Is that right?
Yeah, and I mean, businesses are made up of people, and you're always thinking about the consumer, even if, you're making an ingredient. At the end of the day, in that value chain, there's a consumer. So everything is made up of people. And I think that we separate too much. There's too much disconnection between this idea of industry or the market or the government that's going to save us. Actually, it is just personal. And I think if we can try to see things, and even when there's division, that if you're in an NGO and you're, opposing an oil company, fair enough. But we also have to see that the NGO and the oil company, they're also people. So how can we kind of meet in a human way? And how can we have a sort of human personal connection rather than it always being so adversary?
Yeah, that's brilliant, brilliant. And so I know as we come towards the end of this episode, we mentioned a little bit there about your forest therapy guide, which just sounds absolutely lovely. Clearly, you're a nature lover. So as we come towards the end, what role does that play in your life and in your work?
It really influences everything. I mean, working in sustainability is about, trying to protect the planet. I said earlier, we need to save ourselves, but there's also a lot of day-to-day work, that we're doing to try to make a difference on the planet. And what I've come to understand is that we protect what we love. And there's lots of people working in sustainability, in Brussels or in companies, and they're actually quite disconnected from nature. And my dream would really be to take everybody that's working in any kind of sustainability related industry or job and have them have regular time in nature, and not just, walking the dog or listening to a podcast and stamping through the fields or whatever, like many people do on a regular basis, but really coming to slow down in nature. And it's what's really beautiful about forest bathing and forest therapy is, we open our senses to the nature that's around us, but that also helps us then connect to ourselves and really see what's important. And, we protect what we love. It helps us to keep coming back. I talked about burnout and compassion fatigue. I think it's a very mindful way of being in nature and resetting so that we're able to keep showing up and keep coming back to be effective as activists and change makers. And that to me is really important.
Yeah, it's a great sentiment and a great viewpoint. And interestingly, you're the second guest of mine who now we have inadvertently agreed to go for a walk in the woods with, because I also agreed to do that with Karim of Enzyme. So there's clearly a trend here. So I very much look forward to doing that with you.
Wonderful.
So great. Listen, thanks very much, Kathryn. Before we end this episode, I'd just like to invite any collaborative bio pioneers to feel free to contact me at paul@biomarketinsights.com, and let's see what interesting, fun things we can do together. So Kathryn, that pretty much wraps up this brilliant conversation. On behalf of myself and our viewers from around the world, I'd just like to thank you for your amazing vision, insight, and I think you've brought a new direction and stance on a lot of the conversations that we've had in the past. So thank you for that. And I wish you and all the team at Sustainability Consult all the best for the rest of the year. And I hope we can meet in person and share a glass of wine one day.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye.